my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Let me start today's message not with my own story, but with my wife's story, Tahe's story. By the way, she gave me a permission to share this. If not, I wouldn't do it. It was when Dae was in college. She was a part of the choir that traveled around the world, like the United States, Japan, and Europe. Every trip, after singing songs at local churches and finishing the ministry portion of the trip, on the last day or two, her team, just like any other visitors, they did some tour and shopping. So one time she visited an outlet, bought some clothes, especially at Polo. Ralph Lauren, because it was way cheaper here in the United States than in Korea. And she came back. So after the mission trip was over, she went back to school the first day of new semester. And I had many culture shocks in the United States, when I came. One of them is what college students, what they get to wear at school. You know what's coming out. Now, I went to Emory University for my master's in Atlanta, and those undergrads, they were wearing flip-flops and sweatshirts, which looked like, for me, pajamas. And I was thinking, seriously? Because in Korea, the first back to school day, especially in college, you're gonna watch a fashion show. That's what's happening in Korea. And I was looking at this, college students wearing pajamas, are you serious? So this was Dae's outfit. She had a polo hat, polo jacket, and Louis Vuitton handbag, because her aunt was a fashion designer and she happened to leave that bag at Dae's house, and so she took it. Her t-shirt was not polo, but it was impressive enough. It says study hard. Study hard. And last, but most importantly, she was wearing sunglasses with two big crosses around her neck. So that day she had fun, taking new classes and meeting her friends. But then on the way back, when she was walking toward a subway station, she saw a street cleaner. One of the lowest paid workers in Korea. Then she looked at her outfit. Polos, Louis Vuittons, and she was wearing what? The clothes. She told me, she was recap this event, and she was telling me, I wanted to hide my cross. Because I knew in my heart something didn't really fit. You see? And then my question was, why was there a tension? The point is not those brands are bad and not Christian. That's not the point. But the culture of showing off and seeking recognition are in conflict with Christian discipleship. Today's text also speaks of this tension, the tension between man's pursuit of recognition and Jesus' pursuit of servanthood. How his followers ought to live to be his disciples, because the logic of this word and the logic of God's kingdom doesn't really fit together. So the text begins with a caution. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples. About what? About his passion, his suffering, death, and resurrection. He is on the way to Jerusalem, remember? In this section of Mark's Gospel, Jesus is on the way. He wanted to keep this passion that will come upon him. He wanted to keep this in secret. But disciples, they neither understood him nor asked him about this because they were too afraid to ask. Then why were they afraid? Not only because they didn't want to hear about their masters being killed, but also because if that's what's going to happen to him, the passion, the suffering, and death, what's going to happen to them? The same thing, right? But the real problem is not just the threat of death they might face, but their whole value system. Jesus asked them, what were you arguing about on the way? And they say nothing, because they were arguing among themselves who was the greatest. Right? When I was reading this, I was like, what a bunch of idiots. Right? What a bunch of idiots. Jesus just told you about how to become his disciples. Right? Do you remember? Remember? You have to deny yourself, remember? Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. Right? That's what he just told them. He says, you want to gain something? Then you do what? You lose it. You want to lose it? Then you do what? You try to gain it. That was the whole point, but they didn't get it. But rather than criticizing their ignorance, I want us to look at ourselves first. Let me ask you, who don't want to be great? Who don't like to be the greatest? No one. No one. Who hates to be known and stood out among many? I have thousands of people following me on Twitter, and they like my post, every post, and I hate it. No one. Right? No one. Everyone wants to live a life of which people are envious. We want people to look at us and cheer. We don't want to be embarrassed. We want to be admired. If we are embarrassed, what do? We embarrass others. We embarrass someone else to get out of that awkward moment. By trampling, humiliating, and looking down on others, we establish where we are. We want to be above others. That's what we do, because you know what? It's in our genes. We want to be recognized. You know why Facebook and Instagram, they are so, famous and everybody gets to use it? Because people seek recognition. That's in our genes. You want to be great, then you go up. But today's text teaches us a very different lesson. That is, we go up by going down. We go up by going down. Jesus presents a very different way of life, a different way of going up. That is by going down. He says, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. In the world, where people want to be leaders, show off what they have and climb up on the positions of power, this sounds so odd, so countercultural, right? Think about it. But think about it. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that climbing up, going above people and being recognized by many people don't really fill the void in us? isn't it? Isn't it true that the high position can make people great? It can make people great, but it can never make them the greatest. But it is only their humility, their act of service, that makes them the greatest. During the American Revolution, a man in civilian clothes rode past a group of soldiers repairing a small defensive barrier. Their leader was shouting instructions, but making no attempt to help them. Asked why by the writer, he retorted with great dignity, "Sir, I'm a corporal." The stranger apologized, dismounted, and proceeded to help the exhausted soldiers. The job done, he turned to the corporal and said, "Mr. Corporal, next time you have a job like this and not enough men to do it, go to your commander-in-chief and I will come and help you again." He was none other than who? George Washington. Surely Christ invites us to the greatness. But this greatness is not achieved by going up above others, but by going down, by serving others who are less fortunate than us. In the world we live in, up is up, down is down, right? But in God's kingdom, up is down, and down is up. That's the logic of God's kingdom. It's not the word, but the word upside down. Let me share with you a story from Lee Strobel's The Case for Christmas, a book Women's Bible Study started reading last week. Strobel was a journalist who worked for Chicago Tribune. On Christmas Eve, he visited a family, the Delgados, that's how he called them, the Delgados, 60-year-old Perfecta, and her granddaughters, Lydia and Jenny. He says, when he visited their home, there was no furniture, no rugs, nothing on the walls. Only a small kitchen table and one handful of rice. That's it. They were virtually devoid of possessions. So he went on and wrote an article about them. On Christmas Eve, I visited this family and they had nothing. So he published it. And he found, when he visited them later that day, he found a treasure trove of gifts. People responded to them. A treasure trove of gifts, roomfuls of furniture, appliances, and rugs, a lavish Christian tree with piles of wrapped presents. But what made him more surprised is this. He writes, Perfecta and her granddaughters were getting ready to give away much of their newfound wealth. When I asked Perfecta why, she replied in halting English, "Our neighbors are still in need. We cannot have plenty while they had nothing." That's what Jesus would want us to do. This story is inspiring, isn't it? If you are in the same page with me, if you are, touched just like me, then why? Isn't it because we know deep in our heart greatness is found not in the position of power, wealth, and fame, but in the act of service, humility, and sharing. The Delgados, though they were poor and needy, they knew what kind of world they were living. Not just the word, but the word upside down. At the end of the story, Jesus puts a child in the midst of his disciples who argued, who could be the greatest. And he says, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. In today's world where children are highly valued, right? This may seem not so special. But in the first century Greco-Roman society where they exposed or killed some newborn children to control the size of their families, and such practices were not considered to be murder, it is an invitation to the world upside down. So my friends, the same invitation is before us. In the word that says, be a leader, be a star, show yourself, shine. Can we say, I'm not a leader, I'm not a star, but that's okay. Because our Lord, though he was God, humbled himself and suffered the cross and showed us the new way of life, the new way of being not just great, but the greatest. Can we go down just as Jesus did and be a servant to those who are weak, poor, and less fortunate than us? Can we go down? If so, let us sing a song together. Make me a servant, humble and meek, Lord, let me live up those who are weak. Send me the prayer of my heart always speak. Make me a servant, make me a servant.